Garden planting is a very important task, and one thing we want to consider when we're designing our vegetable garden is crop rotation. The idea behind crop rotation is very simple. It states that we don't grow the same crop on the same patch of soil year after year, but instead we rotate those crops throughout the garden. The rotations are based on the major crop families, which are the Brassicaceae, and this includes broccoli, cabbage, cauliflower, kale. The Solanaceae, which are tomatoes, peppers, eggplants, and potatoes. Cucurbitaceae, which includes cucumbers, melons, and squashes. Fabaceae, which includes the legumes, the peas and beans. Chenopodiaceae, which is chard, beets and spinach, and Apiaceae, which are carrots, parsley, and parsnips. Plants within these families have similar nutritional needs. They also have similar cultural needs. And then plants that are in different families tend to use different nutrients. They take up different nutrients out of the soil. So you can imagine a plant that's a very heavy feeder like a cabbage. If you grew it in this one spot year after year, it would quickly deplete important nutrients from the soil. But if we move it around and give other plants a chance to grow in this space, we're not going to deplete it so readily. There's other plants like the legumes which actually fix nitrogen from the atmosphere, and as they decompose they add more nitrogen back into the soil than what they actually use. And so rotating that behind those heavy feeders helps put some of the nutrients back in. We also use crop rotation to help manage insect and disease pests, and it also helps with weed suppression. Now our garden has 5 different planting sections, and each section, in designing our crop rotation, I assigned each one to a different plant family. There's 4 plant families out of the 6 that I mentioned that tend to take up the most space in the garden, and these are the brassicas, the cucurbits, the legumes, and the solanaceous plants. So each of those was assigned to one of 4 different sections in our garden. Now I did mention there's 5, and that 5th one we're leaving fallow, which means we're not going to grow a harvested crop in that section. Instead, we're going to grow a cover crop, and we'll take a closer look at cover crops later this season. Now, of course, there's other plants that don't fall into one of those 4 crop families that I mentioned, and we need to find a place for those in the garden as well. Some of these, like lettuce, you could plant just about anywhere you have a little extra room. Put them between some rows of beans or between your tomatoes. Plants like onions and garlic, they tend to have similar pest complexes. And then our Chenopodiaceae or our Apiaceae, those smaller plant families, we want to make sure that we keep them together and rotate them as a group throughout the garden. Now, one way we could find extra space for those is to look at the planting season. A good example of this is our brassica rotation. The cabbage and broccoli, those are spring and fall crops. And so I found that okra and sweet potatoes, which are warm season crops, work really well in that section of the garden. And I could grow them in the summer between my spring and fall crops of brassicas.